All right.
Brent Taylor. Thanks for taking time. We're gonna cover the video that I did of your videos. Thank you very much for sending those. By the way, those were awesome. There was 5 tracking finishes. We're going to let you explain each one of those situations and what happened. But I thought I'd start for people that don't know you. Let's just tell them a little bit about Brent Taylor, what you do, your tracking operation. I know you're up there in like Northeast Arkansas covering tracking for the public, but I'm maybe on a gratuity basis. But why don't you just tell me a little bit about your service and you?
Well, I pretty well do it to. I'm all about helping the people find their trophies. I mean, because I've hunted my whole life, and I know what a deer means to people, and to be able to go out there, whether it's for friends or for kids or for older people, it's just you get to make people's dreams come true. Whether a lot of people that don't know about the tracking business, they don't realize that these people are basically we're their last hope. Uh, 'Cause, I mean, they've done stressed themselves out trying to find blood or find the deer, and that we're basically the last chance they got, and to be able to go out there and make somebody's dream come true, it's all worth it.
Awesome. But so you don't have a charge. You don't have like a set fee when people call you. It's like when they've got it exhausted. People in the area just know to call Brent Taylor and your dog Lucy, and then do you have a charge or anything like that?
Nope, I don't. I mean, I do not have a set fee that I charge. I mean, that was one of the first things that I learned when I started tracking is people are so greatly appreciated about what you do. You don't have to charge nothing. They're always eager to pay for the dog's service. I ain't never had to charge anybody anything. They give it to you graciously.
All right. So this is clip number one. I think you said this might be CRP brush.
Yeah, this deer
Can you
right
see
here
that?
was shot uh, at a head-on position. Uh, the hunter was trying to hit center cavity, and the bullet wound up grazing the front right shoulder, and it lodged into the back right leg, right below the I guess the flank area. And the hunter probably tracked the deer probably a half a mile and had no luck. So they called us in, and we turned Lucy loose there from the shot site. Got to the last place he actually had blood, and she got into this CRP field is what we would call it. And it's probably a 75, 80 acre field, and no visible sign by that point. I'm sure there was blood on that stuff, but what made this track probably the most unique to me was when Lucy got into this field, there was multiple bucks chasing a doe, and watching the Garmin and knowing that Lucy was, within 100 yards of me and the hunter, and knowing that these deer that were in this field with the dog, you got me, the hunter, the dog, 2 bucks, and a doe all in the same 85-yard circle. And, Lucy just picks her way right through these, healthy deer and stays locked on to the deer that had been shot. And she gets about 75 yards on the other side of this pack of deer, and she strikes him. And, it just goes to show you what these dogs are, what they're capable of, to be able to work through multiple live, healthy animals and stay focused on the one she's after. And she got him bait up, and we was able to recover him.
Did you teach her in some way, like not to just chase random deer? How did all that start? How did she become skilled at identifying which deer is wounded, ignore the others, go after the one? Do you think it was natural instinct? How did that skill develop?
Lucy was my first dog. Everything's just been kind of a easy, but she's a natural. Some dogs, I guess, they just have it, and some dogs don't. But uh, I've never really, basically, the only things that I ever really worked with my dog, or as far as training, number one, baying skills. Using coons and coyotes and varmints and stuff like that to teach her how to bay. But as far as the tracking, I mean, like I think I got Lucy on a Tuesday, and I shot my first deer with her on a Thursday, and just turned her loose on it just to see what she would do, and it was like a piece of cake.
That's amazing. Yeah, I don't think that's the norm. I think she's one of those dogs that has it, and because I raise dogs, as you know, and everybody wants to say, well, this is the perfect litter, and I don't buy into that. As a matter of fact, I look at every litter, and I'm trying to find those dogs that have it, and I'm talking to men like you to try to find out what it is. And so I think that this is amazing how little training you've done with this dog, and we'll talk about Lucy, and I think we're going to get to meet Lucy here in a minute. But I think she's a blue lacy, she's a red blue lacy. Of course, you can see that in some of the videos. But let's move on to the next video here.
Yeah, this track here is probably my favorite of all time, I guess, because and I've had a lot of tracks that's gone from a half a mile to a mile and a half. I've stretched a couple out close to 2 miles, but uh, this was actually in the middle of the St. Francis River. The river was just low at the time, but this deer was shot in the shoulder during the gun hunt, and turned the dog loose, and she went probably 750 to 800 yards before he actually crossed the river the first time. So we swam the river, got to the other side, picked up the track, and this track I think started at 8 o'clock at night, and I think we finished it at 2 o'clock in the morning. Total distance from the shot site on this deer was right at probably 3.5 miles, and wound up crossing the river for the second time after she tracked it through 2 miles of CRP and tall grass and briars and everything else. And watching the Garmin that night, what wound up happening was Lucy wound up jumping this deer about a mile and a half into the track. And when he got to the river the second time, he had no more gas left in him, and that was where she put him to rest. Yeah, this lake is on the backside of a subdivision of houses. One side's big timber and cow pastures and nothing, and then once you get on the other side of the lake, you get it ain't a mile out of town. But this deer was shot opening morning of gun season, I think's what it was. I was in the deer stand, and the guy calls me at 10 minutes after 7 right off the bat, and I told him, I said, I'm gonna hunt for a couple hours, and then I'll be headed your way. And he said he had a pretty good feeling the deer was gut shot, but he had no blood, nothing visible for the eye to see, and wasn't really a long track. I think maybe 350 to 500 yards tops. But I think the reason the deer didn't go that far was because the hunter had no clue where the deer went, and didn't have no sign to really go on to start going after it. So the deer wasn't pressured at all. but got in there. Lucy bait him up about probably 400, 500 yards, and the deer was actually laying down when I got there, and she had him. I mean, pretty well. I thought he was done, and Lucy bit him, and he stands up, and I seen where he was gut shot, and the the people that I was tracking for was a father and his kids, and I think when the kids came running up with their dad to see the deer, they didn't realize the circumstance, and it's no big deal, but uh, the deer got startled, and the deer jumps and takes off running across the timber, and basically jumps off a cliff into this lake, and Lucy never checked up. She's followed him all the way out there, and I guess I guess he got tired, and she kind of got to flopping around on his head, and which I had shot this deer. When the deer stood up, I tried to put the deer down, and like I said, he was down in his front end, fixing to give it up, and then here they came, and I think the deer got spooked, and away he went. So we're swimming across a lake in people's backyard, I guess you can say.
Yeah, it's definitely someone's yard. They probably didn't appreciate you shooting out in their backyard. How'd you get him out? How did you get the deer out? I mean, did he sink? What happens when you shoot or when a deer expires in the water like this? What?
Well, luckily the guy that I was tracking for, that house you see in the distance up on the hill was his father-in-law. So they went and got a boat, and the deer floated for 25, 30 minutes. I've had deer the following day still be floating. Deer that I've shot myself that have went to bodies of water like that long before I had the dog, and even after I had the dog, uh, come back the next morning, and most of the time you'll see the deer's belly floating out of the water, and that'll be it. But they sometimes they'll sink and stay underwater for days to weeks before they come up, and sometimes they'll be floating the next day or days after. You just never know. But
Yeah, well,
they just got a little old John boat and paddled out there, and one guy grabbed his horns and they drug
nice,
him to the bank.
nice. Okay, so let's go to the next track here, and hang on, I'll share my screen. The next one is this deer that looks like he's down in kind of a wash or a gully.
Well, this deer was shot the night before or the afternoon before, and I just so happened to work with the guy. Uh, his dad shot this deer, and he really and truly didn't know where he hit him. They had a good blood trail for 300 or 400 yards, but that deer was hit underneath the spinal cord in the tenderloin section. But I think after it was all said and done, I think the spinal cord was severed at some kind of extent, but it wasn't broke completely in two. But we took Lucy in the next morning and turned her loose right from the shot site, and she battled through human scent for probably 30 to 40 minutes, and then we got to the place where the guy said, "Well, this is where we stopped," and that's where she lined that track out, and she went another couple hundred yards, and they weren't very far from the deer when they quit, but they had nothing left to go on. Uh, but when I got there and she had the deer bayed down in the creek, once we got the deer expired and put down and everything, I got down there and was checking him out, and evidently when she jumped that deer and ran him to that creek, she wound up finishing his back off. His back was completely broke, and because I, I'm a firm believer that if his back hadn't have been completely broke, that it would have been a wild goose chase. But that kind of kept him in check. So
Yeah, well, she caught him, and it's a nice deer. I'm sure the guy was quite happy, and that was probably a good tip on that day. So here's the fifth track, and this one's Actually, it's you. I think it's you, right? This is you sneaking up with a pistol. So let me share this. Let me share this clip right here for just a second, and then we'll just so people can see it here. Yeah. So this is the one where you're not literally creeping through the creepy woods, literally creepy looking woods, sneaking up on this deer. So hang on, let me just stop sharing here. I don't know if you saw that one, but I know you know the track. So this one actually has a dispatch in it, which, you know, and obviously the dispatch went over safely with the dog in place, but maybe you can talk a little bit about, because you shoot the deer and then it runs a little bit further and the dog's got to stay with the deer. But anyway, just tell me a little bit about this track.
Yeah, this deer was actually gut shot as well, and was shot the afternoon before. Uh, got a call that night, and the hunter knew he was gut shot. I mean, he said he seen the deer when he walked off in the distance, hunkered up in the back, drawed up, just typical gut shot, and he seen the deer just walk off. Once the deer ran out there about 75, 80 yards, he just hunkered up and walked off. And I told him, I said, don't mess with the deer tonight. We'll go in there first thing in the morning, and hopefully he won't go very far, and we'll get him taken care of. But this deer, it was in the bottomlands, getting close to the river. The river was actually flooded, had the ground flooded, but the deer was basically laying probably 10 yards from the edge of the floodwaters, and she the way that ground kind of comes down to a slope, it worked out to where I could actually kind of slip around and stay below the deer. There's a log in that picture, and believe it or not, with me hunkered down and slipping to the bottom side of that deer could not see me over that log, in which I tried to keep a tree between me and the deer, because I don't like the deer to see me if possible, because that's how it turns into a wild goose chase. But yeah, she had him bait up right next to the floodwaters, and we was able to slip in there. Deer didn't have a clue we was anywhere in the world, which, you know, Lucy was keeping him pretty content, but was able to slip up there and get the finishing touches on him. And he tried to get to the floodwaters, but she didn't let him. So he ran about another 10 or 15 yards, and she brought him down right there on the edge of the water. And, you know, when I talk about a dog bringing a deer down, that's one of the things that I'm very fortunate that my dog does. Is she's very protective. Uh, I have all the trust and all the faith in the world in that dog, no matter the circumstances or where we're at. You know, we talk about getting in position to get that shot, but you don't always have that tree to hide behind, or you don't always have. A lot of times you're out in the middle of the water or the rivers or sage grass or CRP grass, and there ain't no trees. It's you, a deer, and a dog, and you got one thing to protect you, and that's your partner, that's your
Yeah,
dog.
yeah, no doubt. We so I just talked to a guy that's a buffalo hunter, and he's a guide for buffaloes, and he said that the buffalo are worse than deer about coming after you. And so I think it is very important that the dog can sort of be rodeo clown. And I've seen it with hogs or anything. Whenever the dogs keep the game focused on them, so when they come after you, they're more worried about just kind of getting away from the dogs. But the interesting thing is that she's bringing it down. She's actually biting, holding, bringing these deer down to the ground. And does she actually sometimes actually kill the deer, or just hold it down until you get there?
Most of the time when she's got one bayed, and she's most of the time she's going to bay from the front end, and most of the time when that last shot is taken, or whatever it takes, if the deer tries to leave, most of the time she's gonna be connected somewhere around the back end of the deer. And I've had her bring them down. I There's been a few occasions where I feel like the dog killed the deer, because you're in the middle of a track, and you've done bayed this deer 2 times, and then they break and they run another half a mile to 3/4 of a mile, and then the last time she's sitting still. The GPS says she's treed, but there ain't no barking. And I know my dog. When my dog ain't barking, she's having supper. And when that third time rolled around and there wasn't no barking, a lot of things go through your mind. Did the deer rip the collar off? You know what? Some bad things go through your mind at times too. But had one track one night. This Lucy baiting twice, in the tallest, thickest switchgrass thicket. We didn't, we couldn't even. You could get 2 feet from this deer and you couldn't see him. And after she bait him once, they broke and ran another half a mile or so. She bait him again, and she's barking. I can hear her, and we're headed to the second bay, and the deer breaks and runs again. And the third time, the GPS says the dog stopped, and there ain't no barking. And then you get there, and you get about 15 yards from this deer, and you start seeing body parts. And when you get to that deer, there's a hole, and she sticks her head right in that hole, and she's going to do whatever she can do to take it out. And if that's the way in, that's the way in.
Awesome. So I guess it's my understanding we're going to get to meet this dog today. So I don't know if you could call Lucy over, get her on the camera. Just to review for everybody, Lucy is a blue lacy, a red-colored blue lacy. The name blue doesn't mean the dog's blue, and the name blue lacies, it means it has a dilution from brown to red, or black to gray. But if you can see her, and if you can pull her on the camera, we can all meet her. And we already talked about how you trained her.
That's about as close as I can get her.
What's that?
That's about as close as I can get her to the camera.
Good dog, Lucy. Good dog.
She's a hot air balloon. She don't sit still.
Yeah. Well, so, and I know we talked about this, but Lucy actually, she's a blue lacy. But I didn't know this, and I didn't know you. But I had sold one of my male dogs years ago because he was fighting with his father. Named, the one I sold was Patch, PPR leather patches. And I had sold him to a guy named David Bozeman, and you ended up getting a pup from David Bozeman. And then I, in turn, met you through David Bozeman when I was looking for trackers to interview. So anyway, I'll share a picture of Patch right here. I don't know if you've ever seen him, but let me just share this, and let's see what we can do. Yeah, there you go. That is PPR Leather Patches, and he is an awesome dog, or was. He may have passed now, but I loved him, like crazy. But he was fighting with his father, so I ended up selling him. But that's ended up being the sire for Lucy. Can you tell us about? Do you know anything about the dam, or who the mother is?
No, I think I wrote it down. It's Abel's Heart of Texas Lacey. I don't. I've gotten to know David over the years. David's been great to me. Uh, a lot of advice. He's basically taught me everything that I needed to know, and I'm sure I still don't know it all. But he's the one that got me started in this whole thing, and you know that dog that I got from him. Actually, I got 2 dogs from him now, but the young dog that I have is actually uh, Lucy's. Let me get this straight. Lucy had a litter of puppies 2 years ago, and the pups that I had, David came and got 2, and he got a tri male and a tri female, and the female that he got from me is actually my new dog's mother. So I guess it's Lucy's grandson or whatever. But no, David's been great to me and for me. But it's funny how I got into this deal. But when I talked to David for the very first time, uh, you know, the history behind Lucy was sold to another family, and this guy got had some work related things come up, and wasn't able to spend time with Lucy, and Lucy was actually living in a house with a wife and some kids, and they were like, "Hey, this dog's not getting the attention she needs. She's not getting to work. We need to find a home for her." And David called me when I started looking for a Lacey dog, and he said, "Hey, I got a dog. Uh, I'd like for you to try her, take her. I have no dogs in Arkansas," and he said, uh, "See what you can do with her," and the rest is history. I mean, she's just been, I guess you could say, dynamite from day one. Uh, can't I may never find another dog or have another dog that even comes close to what she's done and accomplished in in Northeast Arkansas. When people find out who I am or ask my wife or my parents who I am, most people know that dog.
Yeah, that's crazy. It's one of the things that I think about is some of the best dogs, because people buy dogs like they buy toys. Oh, that one's cute. That one looks good. That one, my wife likes that. My kids like that one. I'm always like, maybe you should spend some time with these pups, and maybe since you are going to keep this dog in the house, you may not want to get Lucy. For two reasons. One, so that Lucy can be out, hunting and doing what she does, and two, so these people could have their, they would have their hands full especially if they don't know how to handle high octane dog, and then but you have this high octane dog, and you said this is the first dog that you've owned like ever, or what, the first Lacey dog? How much experience do you have with
No,
dogs?
no, I've had dogs. I've had dogs my whole life. I've had labs. Uh, I've got border collies. I mean, I've had all kinds of dogs. No, she's not my first dog. She's the first. And when I first got started into tracking, I researched the whole tracking deal, and everything that I read and everything that I looked up was talking about these dash hounds. And so I got me a dash hound because I wanted to track deer. And the dash hound's great. Don't get me wrong, but after the first two deer I tracked with my dash hound, I thought, well, this is easy. And then the third one was alive. And I realized that this little 11-pound weenie dog wasn't going to run down a live deer. So that's when I got to researching. I told my wife when I got home from that track that night, I was like, I got to find something with some horsepower. So I started researching dogs. I mean, I was looking at labs, Catahoulas, even looked at bloodhounds. I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. And one guy told me that had a bloodhound that he tracked some with that was personal dog, personal. He wasn't tracking for the public. He said, man, if I had it to do over again, I'd get a Lacey dog. And I was like, a Lacey dog? I ain't never heard of it. So I got to researching the Lacey dog and found a bunch of breeders, got a bunch of names, called some, text some, and the first response I got back was from David Bozeman, and he's like, "Hey, I got a dog. Take her and see what you think." And she's become a very big part of our family. We love her to death, and wish I had about 3 more in line just like her, but I don't.
Yeah, well, it sounds like she's got some unique skills, but definitely over a Dotson. Of the 5 tracks we just reviewed that you sent me the finishes on, I'm not sure a Dotson could handle. Well, I don't know that a Dotson could have done any of those tracks. Maybe the one where the dog was down in the gully. But then you worry a little bit about the Dotsons, I think, in getting killed. Just because I don't know how quickly they can get out of the way. But I do know a Lacey's skill is getting out
Well,
of the way. So when that horn comes, the Lacey's moving around towards the side of the
yeah,
back. And I hear a lot of, by the way, there's a lot of what I'm going to call misinformation about Lacey grit. And I think it got confused with hog hunters and people wanting dogs to catch and hold like pit bulls do. A Lacey Power, yes, there's grit, but it's the antagonization, it's the moving back and forth, it's the quick bites and the snip bites. I've definitely heard of them pulling them down, and some that are more catchy or grabby than others. But I think it's that a Dotson
Well,
probably
when
would have
you
been killed
when
on
you
these 5
talk
tracks,
about
if
grit,
not
you know,
drowned.
I've heard a lot of people talk about some dogs are bred too gritty, some dogs aren't gritty enough. I want my dog as gritty as he or she can be. Simply because to me, the more grittier the dog, the tougher the dog is, the more prey drive the dog has, because that prey drive instinct is what fuels this whole thing. And, you know, if my dog is so gritty that she's going to lay her life on the line every time she steps in the woods with me and for me, that's what I want, because it's one of them deals. If my dog's going to die, I want her to die doing what she loves to do. You know, they freak accidents, getting hit by a car or, something like that. Yeah, that's a freak accident. But if Lucy dies tomorrow fighting off a deer, she's going to do it with everything she's got, and she's going to go doing what she loves to do. That's kind of the way I look at it. I don't think you can get too gritty. I mean, that's they're people don't like to look at them as a tool, but it's a bond relationship between you and a dog, and you know she's willing to give it all, lay it all on the line, just to make you happy, and just to get that reward. And it gets that's like I told you in the first interview we did. There's times it gets western, like I like to call it. It gets wild. It ain't always, you know. And I don't like to. I'm not ever going to fault any breed of dog, because all dogs have a purpose. But if there's a deer out there and it runs out there 200 yards and falls over dead, any dog can go find that deer. But they're not always dead, and they're not always nice. I mean, you got, and I ain't saying Lacey dogs are the only dogs that can do what we do. I mean, there's a lot of breeds of dogs. I mean, it's not necessarily focused on the Lacey dog all the time, but they're just my preference. I'm sold on them, and that's what I'm going to have. And grit, I want my dog grit.
Well, there's a lot of us. There's a lot of us in that camp, and I agree with you. It's not about which dog's better, but I think there's a difference in the way Lacey's work, and part of what I've seen is there's such this with the United Blood Trackers, which is an awesome organization. And God rest John Genet's soul. I guess he passed last summer. I heard from his wife, but anyway, he's built this organization, and he was a big Dotson guy, and so the Dotsons are very popular. But I think when the trees are up above the ground, and a dog like that can move through them, I mean, just even those logs that were down in those woods that you showed would be kind of hard for a Dotson to navigate, possibly, but possibly not. But I think the style of tracking that's predominantly taught from the UBT is this on lead sort of detective, tracking each spot of blood and stuff like that, which is extremely different from what, I'll say it, that Lucy taught you. And you probably, when you got that Dotson, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. The long lead, the let it slide through the brush, count, check each blood spot, look for the wound beds and stuff like that. And these tracks that you're talking about, that would never even be a potential thought pattern. I mean, this craziness, like 3 miles, crossing the river twice, you're swimming across rivers. I mean, we're not talking about on a lead looking for a wound bed. But I don't know. Can you give some perspective, since you've had both types of dogs, on the difference? Because I'm really focused on telling people, like, that's okay for a Dotson, but this is a Lacey. You want it to work out in front and maybe off lead.
Yeah, I mean, I got opinions on that. Number one, I love my Dotson to death. I wish now Lucy's got a nose on her. I mean, she does, but that Dotson, I wish Lucy had the nose the Dotson did. Because, I mean, the first deer that I ever tracked with my Dotson was a shoulder shot deer from a 243, no blood nowhere. First deer I ever tracked. I didn't know what I was doing. I walked out there and set this little weenie dog on the ground, and the next thing I know, the weenie dog takes off, and I don't know if she's right or wrong. And 5 minutes later, we're standing there at a dead deer with no blood or nothing. So, they got their place. But it wasn't until the track that I got on that was a 2 mile track and my weenie dog went all 2 miles, swam a creek, 20-degree temperatures. So they got grit too. I mean, but when I got home, I felt bad. I'm used to coming in from a track and opening the door to the house and setting the weenie dog down, and she runs in the house and finds my wife, and she's just happy as she can be. That day, she walked about 5 feet down the hallway, found the first rug, and curled up and slept for 10 hours straight. Then I was like, I got to get something with some more horsepower. Horsepower with a Lacey dog is an understatement.
That horsepower statement that you make really rings true for me. That's why I got into Lacey's. And I had a Labrador before, and I love Labradors. But the extra weight that they're carrying around, the generally less grit that they have, and really the just overall endurance and athleticism required to be on a ranch is one of the reasons I got into Lacey's. But coming back to a point you just made about the Dachshund's nose, there are the Lacey. I've done research, like the oldest stuff I could read. A Lacey, and I've talked to hunters too, like cat hunters, like mountain lion hunters. A Lacey is a hot-nosed dog. That's my opinion, and that's what I've seen. A Dachshund is a very cold-nosed dog, which means it can, track a squirrel that walked by 2 days before. Like bloodhounds. Bloodhounds are going to, Lacey's could never do anything. Like even Labradors, I think, have incredibly good noses. I've seen variations in the Lacey breed, but their power is not like when we go treeing game, or squirrels or raccoons or whatever. It's a squirrel that was just there. It's a squirrel that was there within the hour. It's a squirrel they sense is in the area with their nose. It's not something where they're going 2, 3, 4, 5 miles to find the squirrel. And same thing with these deer tracks. There's blood. They're recent. They're within 1 or 2 days old. But the reason I mention this is because I think it's important to note that Lacey tends to be a hotter nosed dog in my experience and things I've read and researched. And I think we should work on that as a breed to some degree, but preserve all the other aggressiveness, like you said.